It's 7:08. The reason there are two postings is that this is a budget subcommittee meeting. However, we have the expectation that a quorum of the full school committee will want to participate. So for the next 5 or 6 minutes, those of us who are on the budget subcommittee will hold forth, and then Pat can call the full committee to order. The agenda picks up where we left off last week with a discussion of the idea of more assessment from the town or a supplemental appropriation by the towns. Does anyone on the committee wish to speak to that?
I can't make a motion, but can you move number 2 after number 4, since the number would be updated by that budget update?
I'd be happy to do that.
So moved.
Would the committee, how about we'll move development and giving beyond that and start with the budget changes? Is that agreeable, folks?
With development and giving.
So Roman numerals 2 and 4 will go, 3 will go after 4. And so we'll start with the report on the budget changes.
After 5 or 4? Okay.
Number 2 becomes number 3.
All right.
Number 3
Gotcha.
becomes number 4. Number 4 becomes number 2.
I won't ask you to repeat that. So, Tonya, would you like to lead us through the budget, please?
I don't like this microphone. So since the last meeting that we had here on the 12th, yep.
You said that you had put the wrong date on this?
Yeah, so the date on the top should be the 19th, because it was updated today. I just didn't do that in the,
Thank you.
sorry about that, guys. So since last week, I have been working with different staff members, statespeople, et cetera, to try to, once again, get some lines where they actually should be based on actual expenses. I've been able to get information from our payroll coordinator in regards to health insurance and so forth. We originally discussed last time when we were here that we might have a pretty huge savings from the individuals that were cut from the budget. However, only half of those had insurance and half of those had already been accounted for. So there really weren't any potential savings on the health insurance, unfortunately. So we moved some figures around to get this budget a little more in line. Unfortunately, the net changes of what had to go up and what could come down only netted to $5,000 in savings, and that was a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. About 14 changes. One of those included the separation cost line that I know David had been concerned about in the past. That was budgeted at $35,000. Suzanne provided me with the information in front of you today that has $45,944.10, and that accurately includes all the individuals that are eligible for sick leave buyback, vacation leave buyback, or early retirement incentives in FY19 based on the current cuts that have happened also. Some of the other changes that were made, unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but one of the things that I personally suggested was moving the Chromebooks out of the budget because we're looking at hiring a new director of technology, and I spoke with Tina Mahaney, who currently helps us with our technology, and she helped me come to that determination because with a new director of technology, they really need to be involved in any tech purchases in coordination with the new superintendent in a new vision or however the district is going to go with technology, computers, and they're going to be looking at grants and different things like that. So, and I did speak to staff that said those are currently working. I did leave $6,000, I believe, in high school for tech, just because that's what had been spent this prior year. But the elementaries were completely eliminated. Unfortunately, that's just one of the things that can wait till next year to help us work through these budget issues that we're having.
How does that affect especially the Northfield Elementary School when it comes to park and MCAS testing. Because that was one of our reasons for
getting the
budgeting.
Chromebooks.
Yeah.
From what I understand, the schools all currently have Chromebooks that are functioning. If that is not the case, I would suggest bringing that those administrative people need to bring that to the committee's attention. But I was under the understanding that there was enough resources available for those testings to take place currently, as well as Chromebooks that are being shared that are fully functional at this point in time. If we buy $51,000 worth of Chromebooks and the new director of technology has the connections to get grants, switch over technology that's not in that line, I would really hate to see this district spend $51,000 on Chromebooks that aren't in line with what a new director of technology might have in place for us. And I think that's something we really need to look at with all the changes that are happening right now.
So this was specifically for the Northfield Elementary School, so it sounds like it would be a huge idea for you to speak with the principal,
Okay.
Megan, from Northfield Elementary.
I will leave that to the school committee to take that. These are, like I said, these are just recommendations based on some conversations I've had since last week with staff. In addition, there were additions for superintendent and business manager salaries to be in line with the 30 hours per week that is being currently proposed. Those are still in negotiation, so that's kind of a moving target until those contracts are written. We are expecting that our tuition choice and charter are going to go up. I have actually received the final numbers for FY18, as well as our projected numbers for next year. And we did get a little extra in school choice, about an extra $40,000 for school choice, based on what we had budgeted, but our school choice and charter out is an additional $80,000 at the end of the year. So what's happening is our school choice numbers are going down that are coming in, and the kids that are choicing out is increasing. So I think the culture that everyone's talking about and getting that back is really going to help us see those numbers increase over the next couple of years. So the line item that is $766,678, that was based on the updated proposed budget. However, the proposed budget from the state for the choice out is currently about $70,000 less than what we actually spent out this year. I have it in front of me. Let me find it because I have the actual numbers. Oh, here it is. Sorry. I made my piles. So for next year, they were expecting our school choice out to be $339,900, and we ended up with $419,115 this year. So that is in addition to what is in here. So if you take the 79,000 minus the 21 I already added, there's about 68,000 just in school choice out.
Less money.
More in expenditures. That's not in the printout you guys have right now because I just got these figures.
Is that based on this year's enrollment or?
So this
fiscal
year's enrollment,
19's enrollment?
so I got the end of year report from the state that's a true up. So what they do is they take the numbers from January till now and they do a true up based on the actual kids in and out. And the total expense for once we receive our June chapter 70 for the choice out is $419,115. This budget was built off of $339,900 and then $426,000 for charter. Those unfortunately are moving targets, and I don't really know if there's a good way to really budget those other than throughout the year and making budget transfers if need be. But I just wanted to put that out there to you guys. I do know that our choice in, however, is only going to be 127 kids right now. One that we thought was coming in decided to stay at another school. If you multiply that by 5,000, that's only 635,000. We currently budgeted for 681 for that school choice revenue. So if you go to your health insurance line, we may have a potential additional exposure for health insurance of 45,000 like I said, this is not in what you have because I just got this information from Rob O'Donnell at DESI this afternoon after I was away from my computer.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Could you repeat again what the 339
That is choice out,
choice out?
but our actual expenditure for FY18 is coming in at 419,115, which is a difference of 79,215. And built into the budget in front of you was 22,000. So the difference between that still needs to be addressed.
Okay, so the 79 is less, get less money.
Per the recommendation of the school committee, I did reinstate the Warwick principal salary to what it had been. I don't know that legally we can cut that salary because she has a contract, so we added that 7,000 back in. And some other lines like phone and stuff were just increased to what the expenditures were in FY18 because of rising costs. We were able to decrease the special needs line items cumulatively across the supplies by 23,500. I worked with Chris McGuire this week to do that, so thank you for that. And I think that's pretty much it in the changes. If there's anything that's still highlighted in blue, those are numbers that we could potentially see some changes in. I'm still working on the Medicare number, but I don't expect that change to be big. I'm looking at the salaries for the grants and school lunch to calculate that, but I don't think we're going to get a whole lot of change in that line item. So we currently still sit with 277,000 plus possibly an additional 45,000, which brings us to 325-ish, and the additional 60,000 from the extra school choice out expenditure.
Right, 57,000 actually, right?
Yes, I was rounding.
79 and 22,
Yeah, so it was 21.9, so yeah, so it was 57.
so 57, and then the difference between 635 and 681 for the money in.
Yep,
Which
so
is
it's 46,000.
So 46,000 less in and 57,000 more out, so basically another 100,000.
I've got 125,215 minus the 21, so yeah, 104,000.
So what I was clarifying is the difference between choice out costs, which went up,
Yes.
was 79.
Yep.
And then the difference, and we had budgeted
I had-
22,
I had added in 21,904.
right? So
yes.
roughly $57,000 off.
Yes.
Yeah. And then in
Plus
terms
the 46.
in choice in, we had thought we were going to have 681, but we're going to have 635. So that's the 46,000.
So that brings me to 103,000 difference. And I don't, there really isn't, I have worked very hard with the staff this last week or so and the members from DESI to get all these numbers put together. And now we're at the point where I think it really falls on the school committee to work with the state as well as the towns to figure out how we're going to balance this budget, because we've cut as much staff as we can cut, I believe. We've moved these figures around to where I'm comfortable as potentially the incoming business manager, knowing that the funds are in these lines to sufficiently fund the expenditures that we're going to have exposure for. And now we have to decide where we're going to get those funds from.
I'd like to call the school committee meeting to order.
A special meeting of the school committee, and in doing that, I would proceed with where we are on the agenda.
Pat,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to cut all the public comments this evening because we've been here since 1 o'clock and I really don't care to be here till 10 o'clock tonight. So if we could cut the public comments for this meeting, it would be helpful.
Is that a motion? Or is that
It's a
just
motion.
Second it. Is there any
conversation? Hearing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining?
John abstained.
John abstained. Our minutes are being taken from our video because she wasn't able to return. Okay, David, go ahead.
All right, so we can talk about development and giving or more money from the towns or making cuts. What would we like to start with?
Development.
All right. So I would simply preface development and giving to say that it's not going to be our short-term saving factor. But I have been approached by a few folks who felt that that us developing a way to welcome donor-directed gifts could help us as we are looking at cutting, meaningful stuff that we do that we don't want to cut. I discussed this with town council, and he said, well, typically PTOs raise money, or if you have a foundation, we do. Or a third way would be something like donor choice, which I think I'm familiar that Warwick got a greenhouse, I think, through that or a similar program. Like GoFundMe, they probably take a cut. But that's a piece we can work toward, and our new superintendent has some thoughts on further exploring this way. Anybody have any thoughts? Go ahead, Deb.
In regards to that piece, so I'm going to use the Chromebooks as an example. I'm sorry. I'm going to use the Chromebooks as an example in regards to grants or donations. So in looking at PVRS Tech hardware line and elementary tech hardware line, it's under shared staff, page 8, or under, it's the second to the last page. So my feeling is this: I don't want to count on donation and grant for a necessary item that may need to be replaced because it's seen its life expectancy or it kaputs, in terms of the computers that are here on site for schools. So if we were to amp that up a little, those numbers, and if we get grant or donations of that nature, then fine, we don't have to use that money. But I'm concerned about counting on something that's currently not in place, hasn't had a sought out piece to it at this point. It's a hopeful entity. So I just think Pioneer in particular has always had to wait for their computers to be updated and things of that nature. I think that we're doing a disservice to the students of the district.
Go ahead.
Well, I think that we're not going to do a great disservice to wait a year till we get our new tech person on, till we get our new superintendent up and running. It makes perfect sense to me to do exactly what Tanya said, is to wait and let the new tech person get on board and see what systems they are going to use, so that we're not going to waste money buying something that won't fit into their system. And I think that we need to give it a chance to see if we can get funding from another source, whether it be a grant or a gift from a corporation. I think we need to just hold off for this year in getting those.
So this agenda item was not intended to spur ideas about how to add things back into the budget, but how to perhaps supplant things that we may find that we're not going to be able to do. Go ahead, Peggy.
Well, then I won't talk about it here then.
Okay.
When are we gonna, I see what you're saying, when we get down to
Pat, you have
5?
comments on development and giving?
Okay.
I see giving. Giving seems to me like it's a gift. If you're going to get a gift, you don't plan on it. You get it and you say, thank you very much, and then you decide what you're going to do with it. Or you say, I'd like to have a bicycle, maybe you can give me money towards my bicycle. And then when you get the money, you buy the bike. But it's not something that you plan on, it's something that when you have it given to you. I'm not sure about the development part of it, but the giving part of it says to me that it's outside of the budget.
Can
Martha.
you solicit that?
Yeah, I was wondering, usually, I was assuming this was, this kind of giving would be individual giving, not corporate giving, not business giving. This would be individual giving for a restricted fund, or maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's not restricted. Something that the school or the PTO or another organization would like to have, and it's put out there as a request for funds for a certain thing. But am I wrong about that?
Well, it
Would this
can
be
go both ways. It
unrestricted?
can also be donor directed. You could have a donor who says, hey, I think instrumental music is really important at the elementary level, and I'd like to fund something. And then the school committee would act on whether it would accept the gift for that purpose.
Right.
So, I mean, we can have our own agenda that we're moving toward, but we might also be open to external ideas. Giving is, one-off, unexpected, and development is planned and continuous, and something we should get to. But it's not going to solve the $400,000 to $500,000 budget problem we have here. I have been encouraged by a few folks, though, that some corporate giving and some donor-directed giving could be in our near term for the future. Sue? Yes.
Can I just speak real quick to the donations and stuff? So as you mentioned, any gift that's given has to be accepted by the school committee, and then that would be set aside for that specific purpose. So if Apple decided they wanted to donate $20,000 to go buy computers, that would not add to our general fund revenue or our general fund expenses. It goes into special donations, and the expense then gets coded directly to that. We would not be adding or doing anything to our budget with this line item that we're talking about right now.
So I don't know when it was. I think it was in the spring. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but MASC had a poverty conference, and it was in Springfield. No, I don't remember where it was. But one of the things that I learned at that conference was there was a presentation by a group of folks from the Hartford area, and they were a foundation that supports the schools. And they were pursuing and receiving and managing large amounts of money that supported their school system. So I took their contact information and their names, and we could, I think, reach out to them for some ideas. I remember driving away from that thinking, oh, different than the foundation that we've been having for a while, where I make a donation in honor of a teacher or something at the end of the year. This was a much larger school to business community connection where the business community was buying into supporting the schools in a really big way. So I'm happy to see this on here. It would be a piece of work, a big piece of work for somebody to put it together, but it is being done in other places.
Bill, do you have a comment? Folks, I'm gonna move on then to the discussion of supplemental appropriation or additional assessment by the towns. So one way out of our, I totaled this up to about $470,000 with, based on some undecided negotiations, but that are probable outcomes. We have $470,000.
I have 381.
I have 325 of cuts from this budget, 57 from a choice expenditure out, 46 from a choice in, and we've already in the 325 covered the increase from 50 to 75 with the finance director.
So the net on
then-
this is 277. If you add the 104 for the school choice in and out difference, it gets you $381,000.
Yeah, but walk me through. So this budget needed 325, right?
277,000.
277.
If you look at the
At the
last
end.
page,
Okay.
that's your net. So if you add the 104 to that, you get 381,000. So 104 is the school choice in and out difference is net.
So 277, the choice out 57,000,
And the choice in is 46
and both of those increase our need to cut?
by 104,000.
Okay, so that's 381, and
I thought we adjusted the budget for the increase in choice out.
It wasn't increased enough. I just literally got the final numbers for FY18 from the state today, from Rob O'Donnell from DESE, and next year's budget will be based on this year's actual, which was 419,115 instead of 339. Dave, the one thing we don't have in here is the 45,000 for. Oh, never mind. We do have that included. That was the 46,000. Sorry.
But we haven't settled on salaries with people.
Right, so those are still moving targets, but, and I'm really comfortable with the way that the lines are allocated in here with the discussions with the staff members that, have a say in these and what their true needs minimum level are for FY19.
Martha.
I just have a question about the way it's worded. Discuss board assessment or supplemental appropriations. Can you explain what the mechanics of each of those are, since it's an or situation?
as I understand it, the assessments are settled. But as things were clarified at the Thursday meeting with the state officials, they said they're not going to set our tax rates until our school has a balanced budget. I did not know they had the right to do that, but that's what they said. So from my perspective, the ship for assessments already sailed. All 4 towns voted them, and assessments are set. But we could go back to the town for a supplemental appropriation. And it would differ in nature in that it could differ in nature in that the assessment is money voted by the towns to the school under the control of the school committee and the superintendent. A supplemental appropriation, the town could say, we're firmly behind this and we do not want it cut. So a trip back to the towns, I think from the town's perspective, is financially precarious because we would essentially not be asking for help this just once, but we'd be baking this kind of expense in, and the towns need to really consider whether they can handle that. And personally, I think that for us to bet that that's going to be our way forward, that we're going to get more money out of the towns rather than cutting, I think we better make plans for cutting as well. Sue?
I think that those two things should happen simultaneously. That any request to the towns for more funding should be clearly paired with information for the towns about if this money is not voted, this is what will have to happen. If it is voted, this is what will happen to your tax rate. If it doesn't happen, these are the cuts that will have to occur, so that people have all the information in front of them in making the decision. I have one other question. In the legislation document that we got from Wolfson, it seemed to clarify, and so I called and talked to Jay Sullivan, that this committee could also, in our long-term funding of our problem here, include the unfunded sections of the FY19 budget. Basically saying that we're funding no further cuts, we're not going back to the towns, we're going to fund this budget over the long haul, and we're going to take the coming year to figure out school closures, appropriate administrative structure, all of the things that might make us more sustainable in the long haul. All things that we can't decide right now, but that with the expertise that we're bringing to the district, we can decide as a community. That's a big investment to make in our future. We're basically adding the debt plus the interest plus the overseer charge to next year's budget. So whatever we add to that, whatever our end of year debt is, if it's, $1 million less the 270 we've already funded, we don't really know yet what our end of year final number of deficit is. That's coming soon, hopefully. But then if we build into that long-term funding, the hole we're in for this year, that buys us a year to do our research and to make our plans and to have time as a community to make decisions for how to make this a sustainable district. I just wanted to clarify that because I was confused whether that was actually part of the legislation.
You spoke to the overseer. I just wanted to mention that I did take $15,000 out of the overseer's budget because we don't expect that individual will start till October 1st, and that was upon recommendation of Mark Abrams, who has been the overseer in Brookfield and whatever the other town's name is. So we just prorated it based on the months that we'll actually be paying that person for FY19.
And Mark suggested that I ask Jay Sullivan to confirm the $60,000 a year number, just to make sure, and because Mark is the overseer in Spencer East Brookfield and he gets paid $45, and he said, I just want to make sure Jay knows that. And Jay said, well, Mark came in 2 years after the first overseer got to work. So he said, I have to make sure that I've given you a number that will cover the real costs. So that was why he said 60. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask a question following up what Sue said. I think, Sue, you were referring to the sentence in the legislation that says we may borrow up to $2 million for the purpose of funding deficits in the district's fiscal year 2018 and 2019 budgets. Am I reading that correctly? Okay. Which also brings me to what they said, what was said by the state reps in on our, what was it, June 7th meeting? I can't remember what the date was, but when the state reps were here, I thought they said we had to submit a balanced budget. Now it looks like we don't have to submit a balanced budget, so I'm confused about this process.
Well, I think that if we were to proactively recognize borrowed money as a revenue source, then we would have a balanced budget. It would be balanced on essentially our credit card buying some groceries, and we're going to pay it off for the next 10
Not
years.
really balanced.
But that would, but we would,
Okay.
they would look for us to say, yeah, we're making this decision, rather than we're going to make mistakes in our budget and back into this situation, but here we have decided that's what we're going to do.
I think it would probably go in the revenue somewhere as like a deficit subsidy or something for FY19, so it would end up in the revenue source.
Okay.
the way that I foresee this happening in order to balance the budget, so if we vote and add 381,000 to this $14 million budget by a school committee vote, the other side of that would have to be revenue. So I don't know how the state would actually have us do that, but it would probably be as a deficit subsidy for FY19 somehow to balance this out, or they would let us keep the 14,077,000 baseline for the towns to pay their taxes on, but we would actually report the higher budget, or, you know, have some spending limits, if you will, that would be mandated by the state, and the overseer and the business manager together. So we'd have to get more information on how that would affect the actual budget itself.
If we were to not make cuts, and we did not find any other revenue, we would, and we rested here, we would need $380,000 of deficit financing authority for the next fiscal year. What's the case for doing that? Why would that be a good idea, committee?
Because we need time. Okay.
So this is my thinking about this, is that we would basically be banking on ourselves, right? Saying, okay, we're in a hole right now, and so we're going to finance our way out of the hole over the next 10 years, but we don't make draconian cuts to our district that basically continue to spiral us down. So we have less enrollment and less engagement and less faith in us as a district. Gives us the year. By the time we get to next year, we have to have figured out how to trim our sails to the tune of probably that much money, because we can't keep spending at that rate. But it gives us time to consider, how do we do that with professional help for doing that, and with the time to engage our communities. So it gives us time for everybody to come to terms with, do we need to close a school? You know, how many administrators can we support? Do we have to restructure in a dramatic way? So the consultants, we've asked them to look at appropriate administrative structure in a sustainable way for our district. We've asked them to look at what are the costs and benefits of closing one school, of closing two schools. We've asked them to look at school choice and really do an analysis for us. What's happening with this district with school choice? Where are people going? Why are they going there? And how do we get our kids back? And they've also to help us update our district agreement and get it through state approval. So it really is, you know, we can't keep spending at this level. We know that. But we make a long-term investment to buy this time to keep us going.
Peggy.
Can I just ask a follow-up to Sue? So you've actually spoken to DESE and they've agreed to take on those tasks that you just...
I spoke to Jay Sullivan this afternoon, and these were his words to me. We're waiting for the school committee to say something. We want to hear from the school committee about what do you want us to do to help you keep your district going. We want you to stand up and put your ideas forward and make it clear what kind of support you want. We don't want you to make draconian cuts that destroy your district.
And yet Mr. Wolfson said on the 7th, we're not going to figure this out for you. You have to figure it out yourselves. So that's what I came away with, like, wow.
I think you're saying the same thing.
I think you are.
We're basically buying time with this request for long-term deficit funding, and then it's over. Like, we're going to pay for a long time, but we're banking on each other.
Martha?
So I was wondering if it sounds like we are at the point where we need to make this decision. Are we going to make more cuts, or are we going to accept the budget as we have now, which will be deficit spending to the tune of $381,000? Is that, am I correct about that? I mean, at this point, is that the choice that we are faced with right now, tonight?
I think the next step is to decide what we want to go to the towns for, and if the towns don't pass it, then we have to go to the deficit funding. I've had a week to really think about this and kind of talk to more staff, state members, et cetera. I was totally against the whole deficit spending thing from a financial standpoint. I'm like, no, we need to hold the school committee, the business manager, superintendent to the fire. But unfortunately, because the business manager position wasn't done and these budgets weren't properly funded from the towns the last couple of years because they didn't have a good budget, we're up against a wall of things that we can't do in the time frame that we're allotted. We can't close the school in 2 months. We can't cut $380,000 worth of support staff because we're up against IEPs and 504s that mandate those types of services to our students. So we're at a point now where we either go to the towns or we ask the state for deficit funding. But I do want to add in with that 381, if that's the number we're going to use, that of the million that we currently have as a deficit, 280 of that, I believe, is going to go away over 3 years because we're getting those funds from the towns for the school lunch. So, or 270, sorry. So at the end of the day, this is only adding $100,000 to our true deficit that we have.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I understand.
Because the state's including that, in addition to the circuit breaker, which that 140 has already gone down 63,000 this year to 70,000. So that part of our deficit is actually already decreasing on its own. So we're going to really be net at that million for just the general fund if we were to ask for this deficit spending in FY19.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that Mark Abrahams and Steve Hammond are on call right now. They could talk to this committee if the committee wants. We can have a conference call with them. I have to let them know whether we want to do that or not. So,
I'm sorry, where are they located?
they're
DOR?
No. So Steve Hammond is the director of Mars, and Mark Abrahams is a CPA who's our consultant for the Heart Committee. He's the overseer for Spencer East Brookfield. So these are the people that are going to be helping the Heart Committee to do the work over the next year. So if it would help the committee to talk to them, they are willing to do a conference call with us. Yeah.
I think we should take whatever help we can get.
Peggy?
So are you suggesting we do set that up for our next meeting?
No, they're on call right now. They're waiting for me to email them to open the line.
That would be wonderful.
All right.
David, can I just ask while she's doing that? The discussion on closing Pearl Roads is not on the agenda. Does that mean we cannot have that discussion?
Well, we can do it under ranking and making recommendations on further cuts, but we're functioning as if this is the budget subcommittee to recommend. We have a full committee meeting which will have agenda items for action next Thursday.
Okay, well, I think we should discuss it. It's almost like the elephant in the room.
We have been strongly discouraged by these two consultants as well as the state to try to close the school for this next school year, because the regional agreement has to be totally overhauled in order to do that. And there were plenty of examples where the districts went under litigation because they closed a school in too quick of a time and didn't do it properly. So I don't know that we want to put ourselves in that situation right now.
They may not realize this has been an ongoing discussion for years. It's not a new thing that we're springing.
Right, but it hasn't been acted upon, and that regional agreement being amended is an absolute must if you're going to close a school, because that regional agreement right now says we have to have a school in every town for whatever those grades are. And we cannot, there's no way to really do that in 3 months without putting the district under more fire. Right, but the regional agreement doesn't just have to be overhauled for the school closing. There's multiple items in that agreement that have to be changed. They have to be voted on by the towns. And it's not as simple of a process as I don't think as we all would like it to be.
Go ahead.
Well, it is a big job to think that we can change a district agreement in time to close a school by September. But I spoke with our attorney and he said there is a way to do it, and that would be by removing a section of the district agreement. And in doing so, that still would have to go through all 4 towns for a vote. So it's a possibility.
Removing and replacing one section.
Removing.
So
Is that,
removing the clause that said there will be an elementary school in each town and.
That's right.
And replacing what, Peg?
Did I leave it with you?
No, I don't have it. I really didn't come prepared to speak about that tonight, but
I didn't know if this is even appropriate right now.
I don't
mean,
think it is, because it's not. It needs to be,
Well,
there's questions that need to be
it's-
answered, and
Why don't you have to suspend it?
Why don't you look at the legislation that says, notwithstanding provisions of regional school district, the commissioner may undertake review of results of closing, reconfiguration, and consolidation of school buildings. It's right in here to suspend it if this legislation is adopted. That paragraph. It's section 3. We'll be back from the state. I'm sorry, it wasn't supposed to.
No, I don't know why then the state is the ones that are telling us.
They're going to tell us a lot because we haven't done a very good job.
Well, let's stick to the helpful comments and.
yeah.
You're
Pat, you have
speaking
the floor.
of what section?
Section 3.
Of what?
what?
Of the proposed legislation.
Financial condition of the Pioneer Valley Regional
Okay.
School District.
That's the regional that's the district agreement?
No, the one,
This is
No.
the statement that came today.
Okay, I didn't see that. I haven't seen that.
Thanks for joining us. Okay. So,
Came
we are a
today.
full
yeah,
school
all the
committee right now.
legislation, draft
And I'm
legislation
gonna put you on speaker, okay? Hang on.
When did that come?
today.
Well, I mean, it must have been late in the
Okay.
day.
So, Steve and Mark, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay,
Mark is here.
okay.
Steve is here.
All right, does the committee have questions for Steve and Mark? Peggy? You wanna ask them about changing it quickly?
I didn't even hear that part when we were looking at something.
So we're having a discussion about whether we should even be talking about closing one of our elementary schools, given that our district agreement calls for a school in each community, and the elementary kids are educated there. But we have a business case for perhaps closing a school.
So, it sounds like what people have brought up is that there's a suggestion by district council that if we cut out section 3, certain parts of the agreement that say that we will educate our kids in our individual towns, that would be enough to allow for the closing of a school.
Well, no, it has to go to the towns to be.
It has to go to the towns and be voted, and the school committee has to vote. I mean, we're basically following the amendment process, right? Right.
That is correct. You have to amend the agreement, and then it would be, all 4 towns would have, 3 out of the 4 towns have to agree, because you got a 2/3, as I remember. 3 out of the 4 would have to say yes, and then it has to be approved by the Commissioner of Elementary and Secondary Education.
So-
What do you think our chances are of meeting a timeline for September?
Pretty tight, because then the committee then would vote to amend that section, send it out to the towns. How soon could they call a town meeting? That would be kind of very tight timeline. You'd have to send it out, you have to take a look at I don't have it in front of me, your regional agreement. It says when you do an amendment, how much time you have to send out ahead to the towns. Then they have to call a town meeting, and usually it's at least 2 weeks, usually minimum, to call a town meeting to vote affirmative.
So, can I speak? So, my concern is that given that we have in our district agreement that it's a vote of 3 out of the 4 towns, we could potentially have 3 towns in our district deciding to close a school in another town and potentially have that town vote not to close the school, and then have the other towns choosing to close that town's school, which I think would set us up for all kinds of difficulties and loss of faith as a district.
You're absolutely correct. That would cause a lot of a lot of upsetness within your district, because you're trying to all of a sudden do it so quickly without going through a process. Usually it takes 6 months to 8 months, if not longer, when regional school districts, when they are looking to close and going through that process. And everybody understands it. And just if the town wanted to keep that school open, are they willing to pay the extra money to keep it open?
Anyone else have a question? So the other thing we talked about earlier, Steve and Mark, was the idea of taking the shortfall from FY19 and putting that into our long-term deficit funding and giving us the year to make plans for how to make future cuts to make the district sustainable. Do you guys want to comment on that? I talked to Jay Sullivan about that today. And the legislation. Yeah, I can hear you, Mark.
Did Jay give you any feedback?
Yes, he said that really what they're waiting for is the school committee to speak up about how they want to handle the situation, and that the legislation does allow us to do that.
So he did not say no?
He did not.
So are you saying that you're going to take what your deficit would be this year plus your shortfall in next year's budget, put it into that deficit borrowing?
Yes.
And give yourself an extra 12 months?
Yes, to figure out how to cut the district to a sustainable model.
Yep. If that's what you want to do, you could do that, knowing you're going to have to, that money will have to be paid back.
Yep.
Through the loan process.
Yep. Jeannie, do you have a question?
To a certain extent, that would give you time to start in September, October to analyze what should be done at each of the schools, and then to make decisions, working with all the towns, so that ideally, in the end, all 4 towns would agree. When they are given data to see what the issues are and what direction does the district want to go.
Okay.
To put your numbers into perspective, that would be approximately 1.3 million. Is that correct?
Well, it's we had the 900,000 number, but that included the 270 we had already made a plan for the 3 years repayment for the school lunch program. So what we're dealing with now is the budget as it was presented to the towns was not a balanced budget, and we have $381,000 to cover, and the budget has already been cut. You know, we've cut 12 staff, we've cut back programming, we've consolidated as much as we can. It's hard to imagine cutting more without major change.
So the number, would the number be what your shortfall is in 18, what your budget shortfall in 19, plus you've got to start paying back. Does that happen in 20 or 19? And also you've got to pay back for the overseer.
Right. So
You
next,
get a for the overseer.
So next year's
Plus
budget.
putting money into the stabilization reserve.
That's true.
So we budgeted for the overseer for the amount of months in FY19 that we would have the overseer. And I was assured by the state, because of the timing, that we won't have any repayment till FY20. So stabilization, interest, and debt payment will be in FY20.
Did you hear that?
Not quite. Want to repeat it?
So Tanya was saying that stabilization, debt, and overseer would be in the FY20 budget. I mean, no, not overseer. Overseer's in this budget. Interest, yeah.
The first principal payment and interest and the stabilization would all be in the 20 budget, not the 19 budget.
True.
Okay, that gives you some breathing room.
Do you really think we should take it? We've had $400,000 loss this year, $358 the prior year. It seems like it's time to face the music. I don't see any magic coming at us. We're just gonna be taking 100,000 or more of our inadequate revenue in the future to pay for this year and next year. That doesn't seem right to me.
The only thing that does is buys you a little time to start whatever you're going to deal with, school closings and other things. It gives you some time to buy and get everybody on the same page and realize what needs to happen.
I agree.
Okay.
Decisions are going to be very difficult for the district and for the towns and what's going to happen. So you need a little time for everybody to clearly understand that the facts are presented, so that everybody can understand what do they need to do in order for the district to become sustainable and be able to move forward.
Jeannie?
Are you men saying that this is a valid option?
Did you hear
My
that,
opinion,
guys?
yes.
Well, that's why I asked the question that Jay Sullivan did not say no. If it was not a valid option, let me not say valid, if it was not an option, he would have said no right away. The fact that this would give you more time to look at alternatives, the more time you have, from my perspective, the better. We are in June and classes start either late August or early September. That is not much time to make these types of decisions.
And these decisions are going to be very hard at times to make and very concerned by the individual towns, what you're going to do. And so you need to bring people together and realize, here are the facts, some of the stuff we can work with you on that, and then making the decisions, that's going to be the best decision because you're in a difficult times.
Katie?
I would like to ask both of you a hypothetical question that I posed to our lawyer a couple weeks ago. If, say, the parents of our smallest elementary school opted to school choice their children into one of the other elementary schools, what happens?
I don't qualify what you mean. What happens if you have school choice children in your district, they have a right to stay, and wherever you assign, or that if you close a school, here's where the assignment to go, and then they can decide whether they want to stay or if they want to leave.
Jeannie, were you talking about intra-district transfers?
Yes, if they treat...
All right, so that would not be choice, because choice is coming from another district.
Right.
But it has occurred to some folks that using our multiple campuses to load balance, so if we are faced at one of our larger elementary schools with the possibility of needing to add a second section of the 5th grade, that if we got parents to voluntarily transfer their kids to another of our elementary schools that has capacity that could take them, and then we could forego adding that second teacher at that school.
That has to go through administration first.
It has to be approved.
Right.
I think those transfers go to the school committee for voting. But
No, they go to the administration.
They go to administration.
Superintendent, I believe.
They go to administration.
With respect to class size. Superintendent.
If you did not have in your agreement that the elementary to be in their own town, then the school committee can make decisions of where they're going to go. But the fact that you've got that in there, you'd have to, as we said earlier, change that section of your regional agreement, and then the school committee can go through the process of, are you going to close, where are they going to go, and then they can be assigned. And that would not be an issue, but it's an issue now because it says in their own town, so you've got to get that amended. And if you're going to do that, part of that is to get an amendment, and then also, what is your plan? Where are they going to go? How are you going to do that? That's where you need time to do it.
Sharon?
The select board question. We have how many select board do we have here from a couple of towns? Can you answer a question for me? How long would it take for you to get together a special town meeting and get the vote?
One thing, to have a special town meeting in July or August is, I think, it's ludicrous. You're just not gonna get participation. This is a major function to the town to change the district agreement. My suggestion is wait till May of next year and have it at the annual town meeting, or have it in October or November when people are in town. I just don't see, you know, and if you're gonna have the votes, they should be all on the same night. You know, not to schedule Leiden at June 4th and Northfield on September 3rd and because you're gonna get the towns fighting against one another. You need to have it on the same night, at the same time.
So do all the other select board feel the same way?
But you need to start the process. You can't wait till May to start the process. That's correct. You need to start the process now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's gonna take you.
So the committee is talking with select board members.
That's not what I was asked to do by.
Legally, you have to post a special town meeting 2 weeks ahead of the town
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah.
And you need your town administrator to have time to get the warrant together and do the posting.
So by the way, they drop the
tomorrow,
amendment, they gotta get the amendment, you usually have prior approval from the department, and then it goes to the towns, and they agree, then it goes back to the department to be, with all the certified votes to be signed by the commissioner. That takes time.
So you just suggested that that DESI would need to approve the warrant change before it goes to the town meetings?
We suggest that because
Yeah.
if you don't get their approval, prior
Right.
approval, say,
Right.
basically it said, if we send this amendment out, and all the towns, about 3/4 to 30
Yeah.
voted
Yeah.
yes, will you approve it? And you want that ahead of time, because you don't want to send something out, then you send it to the show note.
Right.
You miss this or that, before it's not approvable.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Any more questions or comments for these guys?
Thank you
Yeah.
for your
Thank you.
time.
Thank you very much.
Well, Steve and Mark will be in the district for a year, so thanks, you guys.
Come back and come and visit us.
We will we are scheduled to do a Heart Committee phone conference with Steve and Mark at the next school committee meeting to talk about the work of the Heart Committee and the contract and the 4 areas of work together.
Are you talking about next Thursday's
Yes,
meeting?
yes. Okay?
Sharon, can you just make sure they realize we're talking
All right,
about
we're
school
set for now. Thanks, you guys.
residents?
Okay, all right.
All right, good night.
I just wondered if he realized the district is 24 students that we're talking about, that school. He might have a different thought.
I think they realize that.
Yeah, they have all the numbers for that.
But
These two
I went
people-
to the Heart Committee meeting last week, and all that was discussed. We were there till about 9:30.
Well, then I would say we take that off the table.
Well,
Yeah, I think,
I think we have to leave it.
Well,
but
for tonight.
I think we
For
need
tonight,
to-
yeah.
Yes.
For tonight, we'd take.
well, I
We
think,
need to
I think
get
for
that
our
amendment
FY19 solution, I don't think it's
Right.
realistic. So
Keep working
we're
on it.
faced with either or a combination of cutting and borrowing. I would be really uncomfortable to borrow all of this. I think we have to start.
How comfortable would the towns be with a $200,000 additional appropriation and we fund an additional, the other $181,000 through the deficit financing? It eases the long-term effect, and it might get this budget where the towns that are looking at an override may or may not have to go for that override. But I think initially we have to go to the towns for the full amount first before the state will maybe approve that in the legislation.
I like that idea, but I'm not sure that that figure is really what we need. We have, you stated 381 for what we're needing, but we also need to figure in any negotiated salaries that we have with the business manager and the new superintendent. So we need to plop in some kind of a figure there to make sure we have a little bit of wiggle room.
that would be something you guys would have to do with this file, because those have already been done to be in proportionate to what was originally budgeted for the original hour.
Right, but now we may have to change that.
Or we may decide to change that.
Yeah.
So I think those negotiations need to be had before the number can be voted on for a final to go to the towns and the
Hopefully that'll
state.
happen.
And that would be
Hopefully
by next week.
that will all be finalized by next Thursday.
So it looks like the superintendent is, in the new budget you've given us, budgeted at 105.
So what my recommendation was, because the state has strongly recommended, along with the DESI attorney and I believe our own attorney, that our superintendent is on the hook 24/7. There's an emergency, they have to come in. So if we pay them for 20 hours a week, they could potentially say, well, I'm not on the clock. So it's really not a good idea to have that. So the proposal that's in here right now is for technically 30 hours for superintendent, and if you look at your shared services for curriculum coordinator, we've decreased that from 40,000 to 20,000, which would put John Skegel, I don't know if I pronounced that right, at 0.25 curriculum coordinator and 0.75 superintendent, which would get him in the school for 40 hours. And he has a strong curriculum development program from a cooperative way larger than our school, and I think that would get the curriculum changes started, and we can look at a full-time curriculum coordinator in FY20 when we have the funds to do so. It covers our basis for hours, and it gets the ball rolling on some curriculum changes that I know the administrative staff would like to see. So that's what those numbers portray.
Gail, come on up, please.
So, it needs to be said in public that you have asked us a number of times to spend hours that we've made in our schedule or after school or in the evening as administrators to tweak this budget a number of times. I wouldn't even begin to estimate how many. And 3 times the group of administrators, principals, sped director, assistant principal, and myself worked very hard to meet your request of looking to put in actual figures, right descriptions. We also had the accounts payable person who really was acting somewhat as the business manager, sit with us multiple times to do the budget that we brought to you last week. And I just want it to be said, so I'm the one that, excuse me, I'm the one that's saying it, that it looks like besides Chris, when it's stated that the staff was spoken to in regards to these cuts, please know that until this meeting, 4 administrators and myself, 5, have not seen these cuts. We did not do this together. So when the word staff is there, we were not included. So I feel like we're back months ago when there were errors and we put in the accurate numbers, and now things have been cut that we as a group had a lot of discussions about, and I'm assuming, maybe I'm totally incorrect, that the soon-to-be business manager and superintendent made these cuts, and we were not consulted, and it feels very disrespectful.
So I think and I'm just speaking to the, when you guys brought the cuts to the table, you guys weren't comfortable with actually recommending those, other than some of the line items that needed to be increased, like the health insurance and stuff, which I thought I had captured in here. If there's additional line items that need to be increased,
well, I think
I don't have that
I think
information.
the salaries, let's, I'm
because I believe
always
the
claim to
salaries
be honest.
we spoke to.
It's fairly clear, and I understand that, and it's not my role to make those decisions. It's the negotiations subcommittee, and I respect that. But it's clear that the salary changes equal the cuts. We do not recommend that the Chromebooks be cut in Pioneer, and it's more than Chromebooks. It's computers that are dysfunctional. It's the Chromebooks at Northfield that we need to have the MCAS properly administered. That's a must from the DESE. The curriculum coordinator that is cut was not discussed with us. It is not something that we recommended. We kept that in there intentionally and made other cuts.
So most
like I
of
said, this is the first time that the 5 of us have seen these.
So the
in
salaries
bold.
that are on here are the ones that were discussed at the meetings that we had last Monday and Tuesday. So all the salaries on here were verified in those meetings, correct? Other than the 2 new, the superintendent and the business manager.
Correct. With the exception of the Warwick principal herself volunteered to decrease her salary. That was her choice. We tried to convince her not to do that, yet she
Right, but on
wanted to do that.
recommendation of the school committee to increase that back because she has a contract and I don't know what our legal ramifications are of decreasing that. Even though she volunteered, I think the contract would need to be amended to incorporate
That's
that.
a pretty simple one. If you got a contract and the person is willing to alter it and they're going to a lower number, that can be obtained. That's not a problem. Gail, thank you. You've once again told us your dissatisfaction with the situation we find ourselves in. We've got a job to do and we have to make cuts.
That's correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth, did you want to speak? Steph?
It's under shared.
In an effort to help balance the budget in this district and to cut administrative costs, which I've heard again and again this evening, I volunteered to go back to 0.5, and I am fine with that, and I will have my contract rewritten. It is a little distressing to see that as we make these cuts, the administrative costs have gone up $60,000 since the last time I saw this budget. So, you know, I don't know. I hope we're all on the same page.
When this original budget was, I was just going to say both of
you
those
need to be
were.
called on. Just.
Yeah, we have to work on that.
Megan.
I just want to speak briefly on the Chromebooks. We're naming them Chromebooks, but it's really technology. Ideally, it would be Chromebooks, but we do have failing computers, teacher computers, and other computers in the school. In addition, we have gone yet another day with no internet, and I'm hearing, I don't know, it's not been confirmed, but it may be a firewall issue that may have a very large price tag, and that is going to need to be resolved. So I think to only have $500 in the elementary technology budget, whether it ends up being for Chromebooks or replacing broken equipment and our internet connection, I think would be a disservice to the school. It is for MCAS, but also the technology needs are really about everyday learning, having exposure to or access to the computer so that that students are competent and fluent with using the technology. It's part of teaching, it's part of learning. It's close to removing math workbooks from them. So I think that it's been in the budget, it's been cut for a couple years, and I'm concerned about not having adequate money in the budget for the technology needs at the elementary level, particularly Northfield. Thank you.
Megan, can you provide like a spreadsheet of what the original cost included? Because when we spoke at the meeting of administrators and whatever, when we looked at this budget, they were simply named Chromebooks. So I think if we had that detail, knowing exactly what those costs were looking to cover, I think it would allow the school committee to look at adding those back appropriately. And without a technology director, it is very hard to say what we need and what we don't need. So hopefully over the summer, some of those issues that you're talking about can be addressed too. But I think if we have a detailed of what those are for actually, rather than just naming them Chromebooks, I think that would allow the school committee to better make those adjustments if necessary, or with some explanations to it.
Yeah, I think that's a,
Okay, Tanya, can you tell us where the curriculum coordinator is?
It's in the under share, or oh, sorry, it's under Pioneer.
Pioneer.
It's a high school curriculum.
Jeannie?
I keep hearing about the Chromebooks. We should wait until we have the technology person hired. Well, to me, that's putting the cart before the horse. I think whoever we hire for technology has to work with what we currently have. Whether it be replacing what we have, upgrading what we have, but I think that should be one of the things. We can't afford to have a technology person come in and say we have to change everything. I believe that the technology person has to work with what we currently have.
I'd like to note, though, we've made progress in technology. 3 years ago, we were running Novell. We may have been the only entity within 100 miles still running Novell. We may have been the only non-third world. So we've made. I'm concerned with the $360,000 structural deficit and answering the question, do we want to mortgage the future? Do we want to make cuts? Do we want to make a combination? That's the question before us here. I'm very uncomfortable putting all that on the credit card.
I'm uncomfortable too, but at the same time, this budget has been unbelievably cut. To me, there is no way that you can cut any more out of this budget. As I see, for instance, the shared, the music. Under art.
Yeah,
Is it
shared. Page 8.
Yeah, the shared, music, it was 487, 79, and then it went down to 358, now it's down to 232. That's like we're destroying ourselves. And we're not gonna get students coming in here if we keep making more cuts beyond that. I think it's ridiculous to think that we're gonna cut more money out of this budget. I don't wanna get into debt either, but it's feeling like it's the only lifeline we've got.
Everybody's got their head in the papers. Anybody want to say anything? Go ahead.
I just want to apologize to Gail. When I referred to the staff, I spoke with Chris directly because I noticed there were significant supply lines that were not anywhere in line with what was actually spent in FY18. So I was not working on the administrative suggestions. I was simply, as an outsider and a volunteer, looking at the line items that appeared to have extras in them. And the Chromebooks, like I said, because that was something that seemed to fall in line with the tech director, that was simply a recommendation based on the situation we're currently in. I'm all for technology. I think the kids really need that. But we're being forced to come up with a minimum essential budget right now. If we can add them back with the deficit financing, and that's something the school committee is comfortable with, that's a decision that they will have to, or a supplemental appropriation from the towns, that is a decision the school committee has to make. This is simply recommendations from myself to assist the school committee in making these budget decisions.
We keep walking around what we need to do. We're talking about not wanting to cut. We're talking about, do we take out a loan? Do we cut more? Do we not cut? I think it's about time we made some decisions, we moved on. It's now the 19th of June. July 1st is right on our back door. If we don't do something now, we're going to be in bigger trouble when July 1st comes. So let's just make a decision, decide what we're going to do. It's now 8:30. I've been here since 1 o'clock. I'm ready to make a decision, move on, and get going and forget about all this procrastination.
Martha?
I was kind of ready to make a motion, so I'm going to make a motion, we can either,
Whatever time is any.
okay. It'll either pass or not pass. So I've listened to all the different ideas. I don't want to cut anymore. I don't see anywhere to cut. So my motion is kind of a hybrid. Get the final figure of what we need for asking the towns for money. Ask the towns for partial, like Tanya, let's say it's 400,000. We could ask the towns for 200,000. The other 200,000 could be funded through the deficit loan that we're getting. That's a hybrid. Either you like it or you don't like it. If anybody wants to second it, we can vote on it.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, just for
Thank you.
discussion.
How
Margaret?
would you see that working? I would see it working by taking whatever amount we want to go to the towns for more appropriation, not a large amount, having special meetings and see if it goes through. And if not, then we take the whole thing as a deficit.
Because essentially the town's are gonna pay at one point.
One way or another.
So, under discussion.
One of my questions is, given that the towns require, I mean, it would be at least 3 weeks before it could be a special town meeting for this purpose, at least. Am I correct?
A minimum of that, and it'd be nice if you talked to the towns to see what they could afford before you ask them for an amount.
Well, I'll ask you now.
Every town's not here, and we haven't come prepared with those numbers.
So it occurs to me that,
So
that
it's gonna be
in addition,
nonstop.
in addition to asking the towns for half of what our identified need is, borrowing half, that we also need to buckle down and make cuts in case no additional funds come our way. We're going to need to have 3 or 4 towns.
Have made cuts.
Pardon?
We have made cuts.
Well, no, we need to rank additional cuts in case the towns, I mean, if the number is 400 and we come to the towns for 100,000, Northfield's going to see, for 200,000, Northfield's going to see 100,000 of it. And there's a possibility that it's not, there's a possibility that the select board will say, not interested, in which case 10% of the voters need to sign a petition to force a special town meeting. It's not I'm not going to count those chickens. We also need to have in our back pocket the reality of what failure is going to mean. And having done that, I don't want to do it in a cynical way, but that can actually assist support. And anybody that's been through Prop 2.5 votes over the years knows that it's very easy to be accused of choosing things that are just so unacceptable in order to pass. We need to figure out what's next on our cut list, if it comes to that. Or make the affirmative decision, we're going to borrow the whole thing if the town say no.
That was my motion.
Borrow the whole thing if the
No.
towns say no.
Go to the town for half, borrow half. If it fails in the towns, then we would have, all right, well then vote it down, whatever.
Well, I need to understand the motion. I thought it was a 50-50 deal. I didn't- All right, what happens if the towns say no?
We don't know when numbers.
Then it
We're
goes into
six-
deficit.
400
number.
is a dang good number, just for nice round figures.
If the towns say no, I thought this was a way, I know that it's complicated to go to the towns, I understand that. But there's a considerable feeling that we can test, I don't want to put it that way, test, but we can find out if the towns will support a minimal amount to keep the schools going and reduce the deficit, which will have to be paid for anyway eventually. So either way, the towns are paid for it. It's not going to fly out of the sky. It'll be the taxpayers, one way or the other. So that was my idea. So when you say, what would we do if it doesn't pass? Then it would go to deficit spending.
100% deficit spending.
Yes.
Peggy?
If we're gonna make the towns have a special town meeting, why can't we put an article on about closing Pearl Road, or amending the,
Well, we could.
district agreement. It's really not as complicated as everyone keeps trying to make it sound.
We could try to do it simply, couldn't we? Jeannie?
My concern is that to go to a town meeting, which would be a minimum of 3 weeks out,
Easily.
and if it doesn't pass, then we're right back to square one.
There we are.
So we haven't made
matter.
any forward movement here.
Jeff, as a selectman, I'm going to recognize you.
I'd just like to make a suggestion. You know, if you're talking about having town meetings, there's time frames that we look at, you know, and calendars, and in October, I would suggest maybe having a special town meeting for a special appropriation the month of October, because anything after October, then you're interfering with the assessors, and they want to set the tax rate, and it's going to be chaos. So I would suggest that the school committee send out a letter right now to the select boards, asking the select boards to sit down with their accountants, and when this fiscal year ends, we get with the accountants, we tell them to close out the books as rapidly and as correctly as they can. We'll get in touch with Terry Williams from DOR and ask him if he can have work with Northfield, Warwick, and Bernardston and Leiden because of our problem here, and ask him that we'd like to get our free cash statement as soon as possible, like in October, the middle of October. We can set up the special town meetings, and at least then the 4 towns would be looking at free cash statements to make your supplemental appropriation, 200,000 or maybe the whole thing, I don't know, depending on what the towns get for free cash. And you know, if you're gonna put this off, and then you're looking at November or December, the towns are not gonna do it because the tax rate's gonna have to get set, and the tax bills have gotta go out by December 31st. So.
Well, I think the idea was to have a special town meeting as soon as possible over your objection that summertime is not a good time. It's not a good time, but sooner is a better time for us than later. I mean, what you're suggesting, we could, on a contingent basis, say we want to borrow it all, and then if the towns do come through with free cash, we could reduce the amount of borrowing.
We could plug in a budget as it exists and start the budget, right?
I have no idea what a firewall costs. That could end up being a capital improvement, for all we know. Jane, do you know anything about firewalls?
Not to quote a cost for you.
Is it an expensive fix?
Well, it's not like a physical thing that you go to the store and pick up and bring home and put on the shelf. You have to install it, it has to fit with everything else.
And it's time,
Everything has to work with it.
yes, I understand that, but, so that could be a capital,
It's under Pioneer. It's under
All right, so other folks had their hands up on this matter, on this motion of borrowing.
So I actually agree with the gentleman from the select board. The timing actually would be really good. So if they can get their free cash certified end of September, beginning October, that gives us time, if they do not vote it at a special town meeting, to get that money from legislation, which then allows them to set their tax rate by December still. When we had the meeting with the Department of Revenue and all the folks that came on June 7th, they said that we do not have to know that number that we want to deficit spend on July 1st. This is going to be a process. As long as we have that deficit spending approved before the towns go to set their tax rate, and we have a $14,400,000 budget approved by then that would allow everything to kind of smooth itself out. And like you said, if the towns have free cash, that doesn't put them up against a 2.5 override. And we start the year with the budget that we currently have, and we have that flexibility to deficit spend. I'm not saying that the towns have the free cash, but it gives us time to go through the motions.
Free cash, tax levy, it's all our money. It doesn't, if we spend our free cash in the fall, we'll have less free cash available in the spring to supplement our budget. So it's not found money, it's timing. So we have a motion and a second to gel the number, bring half the amount to the towns and propose borrowing for the other half. Is there further discussion?
And to borrow the whole if the town's doing half.
Yes.
That's part of it. Okay, I'm ready to vote.
Okay, can I ask one last question? If we do that, does that make it impossible to go to the further thing of doing the whole? I mean, is there a timeline of when we have to apply for this loan from the state?
I don't think so. I think that timeline you talked about is what we heard the consultants talk about.
They were
Okay,
talking
I guess-
September, October, we
Yeah.
would get a preliminary amount, and then if we needed additional, that would be FY 19's deficit amount. So we can get an amount at the beginning of the year, say end of
Okay.
August, beginning of September, that will help us get going. And then we would get an additional, that then gets, so the original loan is basically like a 1 year, and then come FY 20, it's consolidated, so that if we do need to deficit spend in FY 17, that all rolls into one for 19, sorry. That all rolls into one for FY 20 moving forward.
So if that vote, which is probably an override vote in the 4 towns, fails, then we can still go ahead. All right, that was my only question.
Are we
Peggy.
gonna put back some tech money, hardware money into this budget?
Music money?
I mean, we just got done with a year of randomly shorting lines and stealing from other lines and never knowing. I mean, clearly you have to have some money to replace technology, hardware, there's the word I'm looking for. I mean, and that, our principals have told us that. I mean, maybe we can't do as much as we had hoped, but we certainly can't do nothing. I mean, otherwise we're gonna steal it from another line. I mean,
So are you proposing to add additional expenditure and
yeah,
increase the deficit?
That's
yes,
sort of the way
am.
I was feeling too.
Yeah.
I know that's
I'm
not
trying to-
make you happy, David, but I think in order to keep the kids, I mean, we see what's happened over the last couple of years when we haven't had what we need to keep kids interested in coming to see us. We see it in that bottom line of what's happened to school choice and to tuition. We just aren't getting them. And if we cut more, we're going to lose more. So you almost have to put the money in if you're going to see the money come back up. That's just me.
If we are going to increase those 2 lines back to their original, we are looking at
Which 2 lines?
the Pioneer Valley Tech hardware, which was originally recommended this year for $35,000, was decreased back to $6,000. Based on FY 18 expenditures, that would be a $29,000 increase. And the elementary would
Listen,
be
I don't think this discussion really has
16,250.
anything to do with the motion, because if we pass the motion, we can still work on the budget, which could
Work on
even
the amount.
include reducing the budget, not just adding things back in. But I think the motion and the second should be acted on, and we can still add things in, take things away, but we've proposed a strategy which says that we're going to ask the towns for half of our deficit as some kind of supplemental appropriation, and plan on borrowing half of it. And if the towns turn us down, we're going to borrow it all. We haven't said what it is. It's a number that needs to be gelled so the committee can continue to work on additions after. Go ahead, Peggy.
I think this is relevant to the motion. Jane did ask us to talk to the towns to get a sense of what they can afford. We're randomly saying half. You know, we need to hear from them, I think, to whether this has a chance of passing in 3 of the 4 towns. I mean, you have said Warwick is up to here.
Politically, I think Warwick will vote for it. It's never failed to.
Okay, well, that's
I would say
encouraging.
I've seen it failed on the floor in Bernardston. Bernardston-Northfield.
in my town.
Are we ready to vote?
Are we still in discussion?
We're on discussion on Martha's motion.
So, I would like to just say this. I think we should just take the bullet and borrow the whole thing.
Yes.
We've done enough cuts over the past 2 years. We are now cutting into muscle, and
Well, we're gonna vote on mine.
So just vote it down and then go.
We're gonna vote on Martha's
So
first.
I'm
Well,
gonna
I know
call-
that.
I'm gonna call
I know
for a
that.
vote.
Call for a vote. I'm ready to.
All those in
Clarify the motion first.
Vote down.
Yeah, why don't we have a minute taker read it back to us?
There is
It's-
There is no
minute
minute
taker.
taker, okay. So, we will get a firm number for our anticipated budget shortfall. Then we will ask the towns for half of that need as a supplemental or additional appropriation. And we would propose to fund the other half from debt, from assumption of more debt. And if the town, if the request to the towns fails, we will fund the entire amount with indebtedness.
One more question.
Yes.
When will the to be announced unknown number, when will we, is there a timeline for that, or is that to be soon?
So there are contract negotiations going on with 2 people that will impact that number, right? What else?
And we're hoping that we're meeting on Wednesday to figure out those contracts, and we'll bring them to the committee on Thursday night. So that piece of the puzzle.
And in fairness, the teacher contract negotiations are on hold. Till we know what's going on with the budget.
All right, can we take a vote on this? All in favor? Signify by raising your hand. Those opposed? 5. The motion fails. Do you have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we incorporate the whatever the bottom line number is of our deficit, to incorporate that into the legislative, correct.
Do you need a number?
Well, if we,
I thought we were looking at more like 1.3 million.
No, this is
This is for FY19, using borrowed money as a source of revenue.
What is the realistic? 5,000.
a cap, you want a cap? Or if we don't even know the true number yet.
It's looking
Just
like
like the other-
360 right now.
We haven't talked about music.
Yeah, there's 380 plus there's
Not everybody at once here.
For what?
hardware. Well, if we add just the stack into it, you're at 430 something.
So with a cap of $450,000.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? I'd like to amend the cap to 550,000.
We have an amendment to the motion to amend the number upward to $550,000. Is there a second?
I'll second
That's a cap.
So that's the upper limit. There's no further discussion of the amendment to the motion, which is to change the cap from $450,000 to $550,000. All in favor, raise your hand, of the amendment. We're voting on the amendment.
So amending Deb's
Amending
number?
Deb's number to 550. We've got 4 in favor, all opposed. So that motion fails. So now the amendment fails. We're now back to the original motion, 450,000. Is there further discussion? Peggy?
I guess I would say I will support it if we get back on track and working on our vision for our district and set some goals. And it seems like all we've been doing is wringing our hands and struggling with numbers instead of forward thinking. You know, I mean, are we going to be a school that shines in the arts and technology, and what do we need to get ourselves there and make ourselves an attractive district to get kids to start choicing back in instead of having all the press be negative. We have to do that at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. We have to move in a very positive.
Are there others who would like to speak for or against this motion before we vote? All right, the motion is to vote in favor of borrowing for FY19 up to $450,000. All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Motion passes.
May I make a comment? You realize the commissioner can deny and decrease the amount that you borrow regardless of what you're going with?
Yes.
I'm aware of that.
All right, folks, where do you want to go on the agenda next? Do we want to talk about ranking and making further cuts?
No.
I thought so. Does
All
anyone?
right, so we're putting it off one more time. When are we going to do this?
I thought we decided not to come.
I know it's long, but
Maybe further cuts?
You want to make more cuts?
We've already made.
okay, if we're not going to make any more, then we're okay.
I gotta support Pat. This budget still, I mean, has it been to our friend MJ? She's ruthless. She's gonna stink test a lot of our, I mean, we may find out that we missed a stitch here or there. This work continues, and at this point, the way the committee has adopted a budget, it is our superintendent's budget. It's a lump sum budget. I hope that we pretty soon get to the point of adopting a categorical budget, which we decided on 15 basic line items. And we're going to be working on this budget all the time until I mean, I see no end. I see 10 years of payments. I see 10 years of us paying for this year and next year in the future, and it's not going to make it any easier. So, yes, good question, Pat, but I think some of us having been here since 1 o'clock, it's probably not the best time to continue.
I just want to say that I don't want to make any more cuts for the very reason, and I'll relate it back to Peggy's comment. I am encouraged by the energy and the optimism that I'm seeing in the last couple of weeks. And I would like to ride that forward. We've already voted, and be positive about it. I don't see anything else that we can cut without really jeopardizing the whole educational value of what our kids are getting. And it's going to be counterproductive. So I'd like to not talk about cuts.
I agree with you. I'm glad to hear that, because that's the first time I've heard everybody speak out in unison that we don't want to cut anymore, so, except for David. Just want to go forward.
Jeannie.
One of the things I would like to know, is there a study being done as far as, are we kicking ourselves by allowing school choice?
That's part of the HEART committee.
You know, oh, okay, only because the town of Warwick has a huge amount of students that are school choice.
Well,
And 1/3 of Leiden is also.
Yeah, but like the district agreement, once you agree to take a school choice child in your district, you have them until graduation.
Unless they leave.
Unless they choose to leave. If you close a school, you move them with your other students. So, yes.
And we've already chosen to do that for next year.
Yeah.
Elizabeth,
So-
throw your hand up.
For just a moment, because I feel so strongly about this, and it has been going on, the conversation, in a way that I personally feel is quite destructive to our district. And I think that, for one thing, if we didn't have the school choice, we'd be looking for another cool million. I mean, we've got $800,000 coming in. It's paying for health insurance. If we didn't have those choice children, you know, we'd be in even bigger trouble. But beyond that, I think just like no more cuts, we need to stop talking about whether and when we'll close schools. We need to talk about re-envisioning our district. And I have been involved in a district that had to consolidate. And what it really is about is creating new communities. Not just, you know, erasing over here, but actually maybe you think about closing 4 elementary schools and reimagining 2 new communities of learning in our district. It's a very different process than thinking of kids like widgets and numbers, but thinking about how do we construct something that serves our families and our children and our communities. And each one of our communities in this district is unique, and community is really important to them. So to be in one of those communities, which I love dearly, passionately, you know how I feel about Warwick. I mean, it really is the best school in the land. But to feel like, well, our children will be, maybe they'll just be driven down the hill and shoved into Northfield somehow. No, our school is very unique. We have 2 grade levels in each classroom. That is an efficiency, but it's also a community. And I would like to see, if we have to restructure and rebuild, that we think about these things and we talk about them positively, because they're so lovely. And I'm tired of hearing this kind of close this, bring these kids over here, put those kids over there, maybe all the 7th graders can come over here. No, that's not community. That's not going to build our district. We need to have a vision, and we need to work to create that. And if we don't do that, if we just do the, we're going to close this and shove these kids over there, it's going to be decades before we have a district again, a district, a community. So that's what I have to say.
So
Well, thank
I
you,
would like to
Elizabeth.
clarify, we do not get $800,000 in school choice. We get the actual for the year, $630. Well, you know, we have a revenue problem, and we're not helping the future.
I need to remark on that, Elizabeth, too, because Leiden is the same exact type of a school. We love our school, we love our community, we love our kids. They're not just widgets and numbers, and we don't erase them, and it breaks our heart to even discuss and research the possibility of closing that school. My children went there. My granddaughter's waiting to find out where she's going to go to school. It breaks our heart to do it. Our school is just as lovely as yours is.
I'm sure it is, and
Yes.
that's why we need to do it.
Can I?
Peggy.
And since I'm the one that brought up closing Pearl Roads, I just want to say that, I mean, the hours that we spend poring over this, it came down to the least awful thing to cut. It's not without difficulty that I even suggested it.
We didn't want to cut art, we didn't want to cut music, we didn't want to cut a lot of other things. That's why we made this difficult decision.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll stay and talk with you, but we're not having public comment. I'll stay after the meeting and talk to you.
I do need to ask what lines you want me to adjust, since I'm not gonna be at the meeting next week, so that I can get you a budget that has a better number. So, can I just clarify with the school committee that we want to put the tech numbers back where they were, and we need to adjust the health insurance to accommodate for the school choice.
Is there a consensus on those things with?
No.
Okay, so I will email out this Excel spreadsheet to the committee, and then you guys can work with it as such, because I won't be at the meeting.
Thanks for all your work.
Thank you, Tanya.
Don't we have to go into
Before everybody,
executive session?
No.
Oh,
before everybody leaves, can we just review the times and the dates for the next meetings, because, just because we should. So on Tuesday, it says the next meeting is Tuesday the 26th. What time is that? 7, budget meeting?
Meeting's at 6.
Budget meeting at 6, and a full committee meeting concurrent?
We'll do that so that, because that's the
Okay.
way we can allow our members. Yeah, well, that's just gives a chance for a quorum to build or not. And by posting it both ways, we're not trying to be confusing, we're just trying to accommodate desire of the full membership to participate in the budget.
Full school committee?
Same time. Okay, Wednesday the 27th, this is a change, Tanya.
27th
Is executive session for negotiations, 10 a.m. for you. Will that work, Tanya?
I'm here.
Does that work? Okay, and 11:30 for John. And Thursday, we have a regular school committee meeting. Thursday.
And we have a 6:30 C&P to approve the Director of Finance job description
That's when, next Thursday?
next Thursday.
Superintendent.
That's already been approved.
What happened to the 4 o'clock negotiations meeting?
We moved it to 10.
changed them.
We moved it to 1. Okay, so
No.
3 days next week, that's the deal.
You're
Okay.
talking about on Wednesday?
3 days?
Were you talking about Wednesday?
So there is a motion and a second to
Right.
adjourn.
For budget,
Just,
7
I don't,
for the-
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
no, I know.
The ayes have it. You're
Were you
opposed?
asking about Wednesday?
Chief opposed.
That would change it to 10 a.m. and 11:30.